Adam Kaplan, presented, of course, by DraftKings Sportsbook. And, of course, this is our Tuesday night Ask ITB live stream where we're here to answer your questions. So we've got a lot going on. Eagles have made some signings this past week. Anthony Harris, the safety. Joe Flacco, now Eagles backup quarterback. We'll get into that a little bit. And very anxious, as Adam said before the start of the show, the people who have asked questions, some people submitted their questions already, took their smart pills today. So that means we got some really good questions. And as I told Adam, I didn't take my smart pills. So hopefully we can give really good answers. So before we get started, Adam, we'll talk really briefly as the questions kind of pile up here. Okay. Let's start with the recent news. Joe Flacco, something that you have alluded to on our podcast for, well, not just the last two pods, but almost a year now, because interest in Joe Flacco goes back that far. Just tell the audience what you know exactly about the deal and how it came to be.
All right, so it was between the Niners and the Eagles. The Jets had interest, but my understanding is it was really between the Niners and the Eagles for Flacco services. And Joe really liked his visit with the Niners late last week. He flew home to South Jersey. The Eagles asked him if he would visit on Monday. He did. Had a good meeting with them. And it just came down to really who was ready to make a decision. And the Eagles stepped up. Howie Roseman stepped up and made an offer. And it was a fair offer. Joe's healthy. This time last year he was not. He was coming off of neck surgery. He actually would have it later on. He gets a 1-year deal for $3.5 million. All of it's fully guaranteed at signing. And there's another $4 million in incentives to bring it up to $7.5 million. Now, part of the incentives is playing time. I think he gets around $1 million if he plays a certain amount of snaps. And obviously, if the Eagles, their hope is that Hurts is the start of the whole season, so you don't have to go to Flacco. But you get by far, and it's not close, the best backup who was in the NFL last season in Flacco. He as a matter of fact, I talked to 3 or 4 teams that watched his tape. He looked really good. And I asked one coach, I said, could you tell that he was coming back from neck surgery? He goes, no. He goes, he looked clean. He moved well. His arm is still enormous. He had a couple balls where he forced. It might have been a Thursday or Monday night game against New England. I don't remember what it was explained to me, but I know there were a couple throws he'd probably like to have back, but overall he looked really good. Best he's probably looked in a couple years. Mm-hmm. That's without having any offseason. Remember, Jeff, he didn't get cleared to practice until September, though I'm told he was throwing in late June. He just was not allowed to get hit. He couldn't take contact until mid-September in the game. So he's good to go. He's the 2. They now have 2 quarterbacks under contract. They'll add a third. They have to go to training camp with 3, so they'll add another one. But Joe Flacco is the backup.
So it sounds good. It's really interesting, Adam, because he's making more money this year than he did last year. And it's weird, and I know people are going to think we're shilling for the guy. Really not. The numbers look bad. I think he was 0-4 and 55% completion rate. But I do remember watching a couple of Jets games last year, and I thought for a guy coming off the neck and who did not have the opportunity to, really compete in training camp or at least get ready in training camp, he threw the ball well. Like, he didn't look like a disaster. I thought he looked like a pretty good backup. So I think everybody's got to be fair. I know people are looking at the stats saying he didn't win a game. He has a 55% completion percentage. Who's this guy? But, Jalen Hurts has bad numbers, a bad completion percentage too. And certainly people were encouraged by his ability to come in, be a good leader, show poise, take his team back. And that's what I saw from Joe. I thought he actually threw the ball fairly well for a guy coming back from a major surgery, which a neck surgery is. So,
right. I just want to add this. Not one team that I talked to mentioned anything about his completion percentage. They just went by the tape and they were all impressed. I was fairly surprised. I didn't even look at his numbers. I started on this a month ago just because I was looking at the backup market for this particular team. The Bears actually called the Eagles on Foles. It wasn't the other way around, as I understand it. The Bears are shopping Foles. They have been for a while. Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens here if Nick stays with Chicago. I mean, they just fully guaranteed his roster bonus, I think, was fully guaranteed this past weekend. So they're into him for $8 million. So we'll see what the Bears do. But look, when you get back to the Eagles situation here at quarterback, it's all about Hurts right now. The Watson stuff now with his legal situation Obviously, you put that to the side. That's a non-issue right now. I mean, in terms of pursuing them, I know it's out there. The reports out there about them interested in Watson. It's true, but I think, as I said before, when we talked about this last week, how could you we didn't know about this. Let's say 2 weeks ago, we didn't know about this legal stuff that Watson was dealing with. And we know that the Texans don't want to trade him. But when it comes down to this player, he said he wants out. If you're a team that is not quite sure who your future quarterback is, you have to make a call. You just have to do your job, and that's kind of where that is.
Sure. I think the only thing, before we get to questions, the only thing that really kind of surprises me is that if you're going to run a certain type of system, right, and Jalen Hurts obviously has mobility, you would hope that the team capitalizes on it. Now, I'm not saying make him a runner or anything like that, but just, when necessary, use his mobility as an advantage. That if Joe Flacco comes in, you don't necessarily run the same type of offense. Obviously, his mobility isn't what Jalen Hurts is. And so I thought, and look, they showed some interest there in Jacoby Brissett, as you reported, and he just decided to go to Miami. Tyrod Taylor signed with Houston, so they kind of lost out on an opportunity to bring in a veteran who you probably could use athletically as well. But I do agree, guys won a Super Bowl. He can play, he can run any offense, and he's run a true West Coast scheme, so that helps too. And I definitely agree, and I think they will draft a young developmental quarterback later in the draft. Possibly someone who does have that kind of athleticism to run the scout team when you want to prepare for teams like, that have a Lamar Jackson type quarterback or anybody who can run. I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks who can run pretty well in this league.
Yeah. The Eagles by the way, they just announced it that he agreed to terms. Flacco did. So,
okay.
Now it's
excellent.
Official. Yeah. So
now we're breaking it.
What's that?
Awesome. I said, now we're breaking it live here. That's what we do on the live stream.
Yeah. So they just announced it. There's some really good questions about this on Flacco, and Jeff's right. Like, you're not going to run the same offense because you have a young quarterback who's a dual threat quarterback where Joe has mobility. He can move, but that's not his game in terms of running.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about Flacco, a couple teams told me, is that his arm looks exactly the same. It's an absolute rifle. Again, I'm not wishing that he plays, but I would like to at least see it in training camp.
Mm-hmm.
I've followed his career closely, and I've been at Ravens training camp over the years. And you remember when he came in here many, many years ago when he was with the Ravens and the Eagles practiced with the Ravens. It was Brashad Perriman's rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
And just to watch him to see someone up close 5 feet away with a ball coming out of their hands with heat, it's kind of interesting. You don't quite see that every day.
Hey, man, listen, nobody had better luck than me. I sat next to Joe Flacco on the flight out to the combine the year he was coming out of out of Delaware, not only to the combine, but the flight back. And not only were we on the same flight, but literally right next to each other. And then I was working for Wilmington News Journal at the time, the Delaware newspaper. So it couldn't have been a more perfect, fate of luck that I would sit right next to him on the flight. What
are the chances of that happening? Like that, you couldn't make that up. That's unbelievable.
Good things happen to me, Adam. What can I say?
There you go.
That's why I'm here with you right now. And all these great people with questions. All right, we're going to get into the questions. Let me first say that 68 teams started that tournament, and only the best have survived. And I suppose right now you've got to consider Oral Roberts as one of the best, maybe even Loyola Chicago. So DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting new customers at the center of the action. You bet $1 on any tournament game. I just disappear.
You froze up.
I froze up. All right. Well, what I was saying was turn $1 into $100. I mean, you can't beat those kind of great odds with DraftKings Sportsbook. So you pick any college basketball team that's still left in that tournament, put $1 on them, and all it takes just a $1 bet, and you win. There's no better way to put your basketball knowledge to the test than to put your money where your mouth is with DraftKings Sportsbook. Don't worry if college basketball is not for you. DraftKings offers daily odds boosts on basketball, hockey, golf, so much more. It's safe, secure, reliable. Deposit and withdraw your funds at your convenience. So download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code ITB when you sign up to turn $1 into $100 if the college basketball team of your choice pulls off the win. ITB, promo code ITB to turn $1 into $100 for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Got to be 21 or older, Pennsylvania only, new customers only. Restrictions apply in partnership with Meadows Racetrack and Casino. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, made it through there with no more issues. So let's talk to our listeners and viewers, Adam, and we'll get to the questions. First one comes from Brian Tyndall, and he says, with the Eagles not having much cap space, are we looking at a corner in the draft, and do any of the top corners fit Gannon's system? I don't think we can still rule out the Eagles signing a corner in free agency. Oh, yeah. I definitely think they will draft. I just don't think you can rule it out.
Yeah, absolutely they will. Now, again, folks, just to repeat, number one, the season does not start to September. Free agency goes on from now until – free agency goes on technically all year, but the guys that you really would want to sign to help your football team, you could expect them to heavily evaluate Steven Nelson, who's just got cut, okay, who was making way too much money. When that contract got done 2 years ago, I'm like, he's never going to finish it. It was basically a one-year structure. Steelers only do one-year structures anyway. They gave him a significant signing bonus. The base salaries were outrageous. His cap number was over $14 million for the season. There's no way he was coming back. They tried to trade him. Nobody wanted him. So he's an okay. He's an average number 2 corner. He's just okay. But he's better than anyone else they have opposite Slay on the outside. So, hey, that's that. Mackenzie Alexander, who, by the way, why is he still out there?
That's a great question. I mean, you think that the Eagles would really like a guy like Mackenzie Alexander because he played in Minnesota, again, just like Anthony Harris. And I suspect, and I keep kind of being told, think Minnesota, think Indianapolis when you think about who the Eagles are looking for. And that's obvious because of, Gannon being from both the Minneapolis and Indianapolis teams there. So there still are guys left. Look, I got the same info on you. I dug around on Steven Nelson, and it's not, I wouldn't rule him out, but it's, if you I know what his numbers say, but how the league looks at him is a lot different. They look at him, as you said, like a number 2 low end. You're looking to replace, not as good as maybe the interception numbers reflect, and that's obvious by the fact that he had a pretty good interception year in his last year with the Chiefs, and they let him walk. You remember they had a bad defense a couple of years ago. The Chiefs did. So even though he had those picks, they let him walk and go to the Steelers. So we'll see. I would say you got to consider anybody right now. If you're looking for the number 1 cornerback free agent, you're not getting it, but that doesn't mean the Eagles aren't going to sign someone. And I would say, Adam, they have to. They cannot go into the draft or into the season, without
let me go over these names because we've got 1,000 questions on these corners. I'm going to take care of all of it right now to make it easy for you. Casey Hayward is over 30. Good football player, but he's over 30. Richard Sherman is well into his 30s. He's a specific corner. I don't see it working here. Malcolm Butler doesn't run very well. Smart football player, tough. He's in his 30s. He was released by the Titans. Again, I don't see it. AJ Boye, not quite the same player he once was. He's up there in age. That's an interesting name. We mentioned Mackenzie Alexander. That one will make the most sense, but I haven't gotten to feel like that's where that they're headed with him. But we'll check more into that. And he's well under 30. Good football player, by the way. And I'm told he could play slot or outside. He could play. You can line him up anywhere. Buster Screen, strictly a slot. Injury history, forget it. DJ Hayden, strictly slot, a pretty good slot. Fabian Moreau is a good name, but he's had an injury history. He's not coming off of a good year. He's got length and he's an athlete. He's young, too. That would be a guy that you could probably get on a bargain basement deal. Gary Conley, I'm told, is a 4th corner. Forget Josh Norman. K'Wan Williams. When you see it reported that the player is interested in 6 teams, you know where it's coming from. It's from the agent. Yes. This guy's a slot corner. They don't need any slot corners, folks. Think outside corner. That's the story.
There you go. All right, Stephen Hollingsworth from Las Vegas checks in and says, do you think the Eagles will trade Zach Ertz before the draft, and will Hurts have any input on if they decide on a receiver? Let's attack the first thing first. We talked about this. They don't have to trade Zach Ertz before the draft, and in some cases, if they're not getting what Howie thinks he should get, he should wait until after the draft when other teams have already gone through. And if the team missed out on the tight end, then they can come back and look at Zach Ertz. But there's no deadline here where Zach Ertz gets money triggered into his contract.
Correct.
So there's no urgency to
No.
get rid of him.
No, now, if you're the Eagles, you would like to get the cap rebate. That's the only urgency you get, sooner rather than later. It would really help if it happened like tomorrow. But you're not going to trade him for like a 6th-round pick. You just not do that. If you and I are running, I'm like, dude, we're not doing this. We want to get a 4. Okay. Now, I would say to you, Jeff, what do you think would you do a 5 next year that could become a 4 next year if Ertz plays, something that he could attain? We know he's had an injury history. We know he turns 31 this fall. But let's say if he gets 50 catches, let's say if he gets 50 catches, it's a 5 that could become a 4 for 22. I would do that. If you can't get anything better, get something for 22 that would be a 4th-round pick. I would do that in a heartbeat.
I would do that. I agree with you. We've talked about that on the podcast a little bit. The idea of you don't need that pick this year. You've got 11 picks right now. So if you have the chance to upgrade that pick next year in the same draft where you might be upgrading the Carson Wentz from a 2nd-rounder to a 1st-rounder, then you're looking like a pretty good start for next year, for the following year's draft. So I like that idea too. All right, next question comes from our friend Mark in Fishtown. He says he hopes he took his smart pills. Yes, with the Birds bringing in a whole new coaching staff, will their opinions change about the importance of linebackers? This is such a great question, Adam. I'll tell you why.
Mark, this could take an hour.
I tell you why it's a great question, though.
Yeah.
I happen to spend the last few days watching a lot of tape on Minnesota's defense just to get acquainted with Anthony Harris.
Yeah.
They play a lot of different coverages, but they do play a lot of cover too. So I suspect that if Gannon's coming here and doing a lot of what Zimmer does, he will play a decent amount of cover too. In fact, he probably is going to have to, because both Harris and McLeod are better deep safeties than box safeties. So when you play a cover two, Adam, especially if you're going to play zone underneath, your linebackers have to do a lot of coverage, a lot of depth in their drops and patrolling that middle of the field, not just going downhill all the time. You've got to be able to have a sense of coverage.
The middle is the whole player. He's the dropper. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right.
So they need guys who are alert and they need skilled pass coverage linebackers, and more than one.
Yeah. So I would, again, they'll add someone else from Gannon's past. Money is, this is what Bill Polian told me, and I love it. I'm going to continue to steal this line from him. First week is Neiman Marcus prices. Second week is Filene's basement. That's you should be getting bargains right now. Flacco last week would have cost him $5 million. This week, $3.5 million with $4 million of upside. You sign more guys, you're going to get better prices. That's just. I was listening to John Robinson, the Titans GM, talk about it. Kind of, if he was talking about it with their website, the Titans website. If you're going to sign guys early, you're going to pay. It's just the way it is. Right. You got to read the market. That's what this is all about. So whether it's Eric Wilson, it was a linebacker. I don't know about Todd Davis, but one of those guys, at some point, if they could get these guys super duper cheap, I expect one of these guys to come in, and it could be a corner, it could be a linebacker. They've got to add someone else. But Mark, here's the thing, though. Jeff makes such a good point, because you definitely want a linebacker that gets the system. It's imperative when a new, especially a first-time defensive coordinator, you want to have guys who get the system. We know that Anthony Harris is in here now on 1 year, $5 million. He's a specialist at the system. Nick Rollis, the linebacker coach. I know he's 26, but he knows the system because he coached with Gannon in Minnesota. So that's why these guys are here.
Definitely. I want to circle back because we forgot to answer the second half of Stephen Hollingsworth's question about will Jalen Hurts have any input if they decide on a receiver. I imagine the only input he might have is, he played at Alabama. He knows a little bit, more than a little bit, about Devontae Smith. He knows a bit about Jalen Waddle. He may know some Oklahoma kids, but I hope that this is not a situation where you're treating Jalen Hurts like you would Russell Wilson or Tom Brady, where you're allowing him to have a little bit more factor in personnel. I don't think he's warranted nor deserved that. And not just, nothing against Jalen Hurts. I mean, you got to be an established superstar to get that type of clout.
Yeah,
but I do think he can give information.
Right, we don't even know he's going to be the starter in 22. We know this year we highly suspect he will be, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. And now they've got the backup in Flacco. So you ready for one from the board?
Yeah.
All right, this is a very interesting question, which we're going to have to deal with at one point or another when we get into our draft coverage. So, Chris, we'll kick it off with yours. If the Eagles draft Pitts, obviously it's 6, doesn't that limit it how the Eagles play? Because you can take Pitts or Goddard off the field. You can, I guess you can't. Well, you can. But to me, this is the beauty of Goddard. You could line him up any way you want. Flex, tight end, slot, out wide at the X position, which they've done before. Ertz, they use at the X position. Pitts sure as hell is going to be in the X position. Whoever drafts him. If not, that coach should be fired, because this is what this guy is. Darren Waller, he's, believe it or not, as explosive and as dynamic as Darren Waller is. Take Pitts up a little bit. This is what coaches tell me have graded his tape already around that National Football League. This kid, I know people are saying, oh, you got, people are going too crazy over him. They're not going crazy if you know how to use the guy. That's the key.
I agree. So
how you coach.
So it'll be interesting if you have the Eagles come out in their offensive package and you had Dallas Goedert as your inline blocker and you had Kyle Pitts in the slot. Technically, that's 12 personnel. But really, you can consider it 11 personnel because you're taking Greg Ward out of the slot and putting Kyle Pitts in. And honestly, Kyle Pitts is way more of an explosive receiver than Greg Ward is. So you can literally say he's my slot wide receiver, call it 11. He just happens to be a freak of nature who looks like a tight end in that regard. I'm semi-reluctant about it, Adam, but if he's the best player and you can convince me that he can play 100% of the snaps because you're moving him around and Dallas Goedert is still playing 75 to 100% of the snaps, then I'm okay with it, because then you're not benching one guy to play another guy. You're making use of your entire personnel. If you ask me, though, which one I'd rather have, if I had the ability, I'd probably take Jamar Chase, just because I think he, it's a little more normal of a 3-wide, 1 tight end offense.
I would say this: if I'm Howie Roseman and Andy Waddle, and let's just say, again, we have no idea; it's too early. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that everyone in scouting for the Eagles is enamored with Pitts. If I'm Roseman and Waddle, I'm sitting the head coach down, who calls the plays this season, Nick Sirianni. I'm sitting down the offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen. I'm sitting down the tight ends coach. What's
Michael? Is it Michael? Oh no, Jason Michaels. Yeah,
Jason Michael. Okay, I'm like, guys,
not former Philly.
Right. Was he a utility guy, Jason Michaels?
I don't know. He was Pat Burrell's wingman. That's all. I know.
Okay. So I go, hey guys, if he's there at 6, he's our guy. I want to know before we leave for work today how you're going to use him. I'd bring him to the chalkboard, and I want you to show me, not tell me. I want you to show me, because I can't tell you how many times in this business I've heard teams like Tavon Austin. Okay, I know they're different players, but he's a gadget player. Every coach who coached them they didn't know what the hell to do with a guy. I know Pitts is way more dynamic, but if you don't know how to use a guy, you're wasting your time.
Great point. That's great example.
Why I brought it up.
Guy went in the top 10. I think 9th to the Rams, right? Tavon Austin.
Oh my God, did he?
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was a top 10 pick. And man, that was not a good
special team
good use of resources.
Take the guy in the 4th round, not the 1st. Yeah,
exactly. All right, next question comes from Aaron Puga. I hope I pronounced that. It's either Puga or Puga, but he asks if Carson Wentz regains success in Indianapolis and the Eagles have another underwhelming draft, does that spell the end for Howie Roseman? And it's a good question. We always talk about Howie's job security and how if there's anything that he can ever do to be fired. I've always said this, Adam. I understand the closeness of the relationship, but Jeffrey Lurie and Joe Banner were once as close as can be, and eventually there was an expiration date on that. So I think everybody has an expiration date. It just, I think it would have to be pretty terrible again, but we'll see. It's a fair question.
There's no way to know, because look at it this way, right? We've talked about this before. Let's move this forward, though, because we could add a little bit more context. I actually had this conversation with someone from another team. We were a friend of mine was not the Alabama Pro Day, one of the recent Pro Days, and we were talking about drafts, and somehow Eagles came up, and he said, "Hey, could you look up?" He goes, "Let's spend 15 minutes to look at Philly's drafts." I'd forgotten that they only had 5 picks in 18. See, this is the thing in personnel. You want as many, ping pong balls, as they say. You want as many draft picks as possible. because the more you have, the better off you are. You feel like you get them all right, which is not realistic. But 17 draft was horrendous. We've called it the sins of the 17 draft, right? 16 was the best, maybe not in Eagles history, certainly one of the best ones. Unfortunately, we know how the Wentz situation ended, but that has nothing to do with being able to play the game. It's just a whole series of events. But anyway, 17 horrendous, the exact opposite. 18, Maddox has regressed here. Let's call it like it is. He's not as good as. Now, I understand they were jockeying him around. He's been hurt, but that draft does not look quite as good as it did on paper. 19 does not look.
Hold on.
Right.
Hold on. Yeah. That draft is Dallas Goedert in the second round, Josh Sweat in the fourth round, and Jordan Mailata in the sixth round. That draft has the potential to be a very good draft.
Pretty good, but here, okay, let me finish. But they only had 5 picks.
Well, yes, that's true. That's not good.
That's the problem. You need more picks. Right. 19, the Ortega-Whiteside pick. Obviously, that's a miss. We've seen 2 years. We know where that is. That draft, Dillard has unfortunately been hurt. We don't even know we know he's going to compete theoretically for the left tackle job, which is open. We'll see how that goes. But 19 draft doesn't look great. 20 is too early. So if you look at it, these drafts need to be significantly better, not just good. You can't rely on that 16 draft. And you're right, the 18 draft looks good, but they didn't have enough picks. Keep these damn picks. 11 picks.
I'm with you. And remember, we judge a GM on everything, not just the drafts. Trades, free agency. Obviously, the restructure of Alshon Jeffrey a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was not a good idea. A lot of what he's doing now is yet to be seen with all these restructures, if that comes back to bite them in the rear end. I mean, I know he doesn't have much of a choice, but, so there's a draft, the trades. He traded for Darius Slay. It was an okay year for Darius Slay. If he doesn't play very well this year, that doesn't look like a very good trade. Philosophically, ignoring linebacker and safety over the last 5, 6, 7 years in the draft has not really suited them very well. So there's a whole lot in there. I think this year is really if a guy like Davion Taylor plays better than we think, then maybe that's a better feather in his cap. If Javon Hargrave has a very good year, that looks better. If Darius Slay rebounds a little bit, has a better year. So there's a lot of a referendum from last year that will carry over.
Two things. See, here's the problem, though. You do not build your team through free agency. I know Roseman's done well that. You build it through the draft, and you supplement through free agency. Okay? I
agree.
So he's got to nail these drafts. There's no more excuses. Okay? It's got to be better. It's ridiculous already.
What type of – again, I was going to move on, but go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's like I understand that he nailed a lot of the free agency signees in 17. So I hate to say some were luck, but it's like you couldn't make it up. Patrick Robinson, you couldn't.
Everything went right.
What's that?
Everything went right.
Exactly. I'm at camp. He was so bad when I was like, oh God, he's awful. Why did they even sign this guy? 2 weeks later, you're like, what? So my point is simply this. The guy asked about Roseman's future. And just right. Yes, you evaluate him at everything. But at least 35 to 40% of his job is draft. Easily. And it hasn't been good enough.
It has not been good enough. Not even close. All right, let's get another question from the board.
Oh, yeah. This is a great question. I think you might have something on this, Jeff. It's from Jason R. Feldman with 2 N's. Okay, Jason. Can Davion Taylor be a will or quasi-slot space LB in Ganon's perceived defensive scheme, or have they has the team soured on him? It's a great question. What are your thoughts on this, on Davion Taylor in this defense? On
using him as a slot corner, like to cover tight ends maybe in the slot?
Or any look.
Here's my thought on it. Here's my thought on it. Like I get the insinuation here is that he's really not a downhill linebacker and he doesn't have a lot of experience, but he's very athletic. So do you use him in pass coverage in sub packages? The problem is it's not just good enough to be fast and athletic. In fact, he was in the Browns game last year and bit so hard on what should have been a touchdown to Austin Hooper, but for some reason Baker Mayfield threw it like 10 feet over Austin Hooper's head. And then there was another play in that game where he was out of position. You're going to get routed up by slot corners and really good pass catching tight ends if you don't have the football intelligence or the experience or that acumen to really understand where you have to be in pass coverage. We're not in the Pac-12. This is not Colorado. It's the NFL, and guys are really good, and he's got to bridge a very, very big gap. And you saw how big of a gap it was by the fact that he could barely get on the field as a rookie. So I think before we start asking if Davion Taylor can do things in the slot we have to see if he can master the basics of what he's asked to do at OTAs, and then you build from there.
You want to take another question? There are a lot here on the message board. Do you want me to take another one?
Yeah, keep going.
Levon Nelson, our friend. Levon asked about Rasul Douglas coming back. You have a better chance of being an Eagles corner than Rasul Douglas. He just doesn't run well enough. The Panthers, I'm told, have no interest in him coming back. He still doesn't have a job. Look, I put this kind of question. I always put these in the bucket of never say never, because things happen in the National Football League. You go, I cannot believe that happened. That would shock me based on what I know about Rasul and his lack of foot speed. It's interesting about Levon on Rasul Douglas. He got off to a great start with the Panthers, and reality hit.
Well, that's what happens when he catches up, right?
Yeah, you would see that whatever number he was wearing might have been 24. You see the back of his jersey too much. That's not a good thing.
You're trying to say that they were drawing the old red circle around him?
The bullseye. Yes.
They are bullseye. Somebody asked, we didn't really answer about what will be the kind of the prototype or the archetype cornerback in John Gannon's scheme.
Good question. Yeah.
I imagine like if you look at some of the guys they had there in Minneapolis, and I don't know who the corners are in Indianapolis. Do you know who the Colts corners are? They don't stand out to me right now. I mean, Xavier Rhodes was last year, and he was with the Vikings the couple of years before. But I sense that they're going to want some physical corners, Adam. Like when you play some cover two and you know that you've got that safety help, you like to get up on the guy and redirect and use your physicality. So I would imagine that they're going to look for some strong physical corners.
Yeah. I'm looking into the type of, because this is what happens. What front offices have to know. You're exactly right. What kind of players do you want? What length do you want? Speed. What are the attributes? Because the Colts have Rock Ya-Sin, who's a good player. Kenny Moore's one of the best slot corners in the National Football League. Xavier Rhodes, as you mentioned, who's coming back. Malik Hooker, who's out there that I think he's visiting the Cowboys this week. That's with the Colts. Now with the Vikings, obviously you know about Rhodes over the years. You know about the safety play, and one of them's here now in Philly, and Anthony Harris is really smart. This is a great signing. I'm kind of surprised they got him for $5 million. I'm not sure. One of two things happened there. Either he didn't have the market, or he had the market and said, you know what, I want to play for Gannon. I'm very surprised that $5 million is fine. It's a very fair contract. Because if you look, you had said this to me privately, and you're right. His numbers were unbelievably inflated in 19. Like he had a good season, no doubt. He had a very good season. But he also had 9 picks over 2 seasons in 18 and 19. And then last season, he had a bleep load of tackles. Why? Because their defense was atrocious because of the injuries in the front. Teams were just throwing. They were playing. There were a couple games where they were down 4 corners, and they were on the field a lot because teams were just throwing against them. So
there you go.
We'll find out. That's on my list to find out what kind of corners he wants.
All right, Tom Welke, as we finish it up here, asks, what kind of veteran wide receiver do you see the Eagles bringing in? I'm not sure that they do.
Yeah, at some point. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess you're right. They need a leader in that room, someone who's been – yeah, just one. I agree. But it's not going to be someone who the fans are going to fall in love with, I don't
know. No, because if you look what's out there, right? Guys that are realistic. Golden Tate is a slot receiver. That would he be better than Greg Ward? Yes, but they know. I mean, obviously this is a new staff, and the front office would know him. I haven't heard him mention guys that would make sense. I'm looking here at my list. Outside receivers, veteran types. Mohamed Sanu would be a great veteran guy. He's awesome, but high character guy. But he's older and he's a slot receiver. Not really look. Marquise Lee's had too many. He's always hurt. Can't depend on him. You know what's interesting? I'm looking at my list here. Man, my Excel sheet is destroyed by. They've been signed. Everyone's been signed. No, I'd love Ty to come here. Love him. Absolutely love Ty. But the Colts want him back. They just haven't figured it out what the money is.
Yeah.
I would love that one, but I don't. He's in his 30s. I don't know. But then again, there's just so few veterans that you would want to sign here. Sammy Watkins has a major injury history. He's not on their list anyway. But
right. I love Jamison Crowder as a sage veteran wide receiver who's really good, but the problem is he's just a slot receiver. And at this point, you're going to play Goddard in the slot a little. You got Greg Ward, who's done well. I think if you want to bring in a receiver who's veteran, you're still hoping though that he can play the outside some. And I don't see Crowder. What's Crowder, like 5'9"? I mean, he's
Crowder,
good, but
Crowder, he's still with it. He's still.
I thought his contract was up. Is he not a free agent?
No, James Crowder was under contract. They didn't cut him. No, in fact, I thought he might be cut because he was hurt again last season.
Mm-hmm.
No, he also can't play outside, so they need strictly an outside. I would do this. I would upgrade slot with someone who could run. I could see that in the draft with one of these 11 picks, or you got to get somebody with size on the outside. I'd like to see that.
I would too. All right, listen. Wednesday morning, 6 a.m., the next Q&A will drop on the Inside the Birds YouTube and podcast platforms. Got to check it out. Really interesting stuff they've got on the new safety, Anthony Harris, on the Eagles organization in general. They had some stuff to say about the press conferences with Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman. They went into the draft a little bit. So a very well-rounded episode, some funny stories, as there always are. So make sure you're checking that out. Our next Inside the Birds podcast will drop Thursday, 6 a.m. And I think that about wraps it up for us. So did I miss anything?
No, I got some additional nuggets on the Flacco signing, which I'm holding for our show, which is not out there. More free agency stuff that I'm checking into. And that's pretty much it. The Eagles are still trying to get the numbers that are out there and how much cap space they have is not correct. So I'm not going to get into what they have because it changes. It's funny. What happens is the NFLPA puts the media has access to it. And the problem is they don't update it every day.
Mm-hmm.
For like 2 weeks, they have the same number. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like they don't update it every day. And then people are quoting it like it's like, no, it's not right. So
right. That's correct.
Anyway, that's all I got.
All right. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Ask ITB live stream on ITB TV presented by DraftKings. Thanks for watching. We'll do it again next Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Everybody have a great night.